We have our faculty development session for the morning. Dr. Gallahan will be sharing with us an update on professional identity formation and the hidden curriculum.
Oh, good morning. Is everyone able to hear me okay? See shaking heads. That's a good sign. Well, I'm excited to present a short session this morning on what sounds like maybe not a super exciting topic, professional identity formation, but people I do think are interested in the hidden curriculum. And so I hope that we can get a couple things out of this as we go through this morning, including talking about what professional identity is and why it's really important in medical education, not just for our trainees, but also for us as practicing physicians as well. We'll talk about what the hidden curriculum is a little bit and talk about why it has a big impact on that professional identity formation. And then we'll talk about a couple really simple strategies that we can use to start to explicitly talk about the hidden curriculum with our learners as we're working with them in the clinical arena. Whenever we talk about professional identity, you have to start with talking about professionalism. There are a lot of definitions of professionalism out there. In fact, all of our professional national organizations have their own definition of this. The one that I'll share with you here is from the UNMC, which is that professionalism is demonstrating a commitment to carrying out professional responsibilities and an adherence to ethical principles. So this idea that we have a duty to be ethical in the way that we provide care to our patients and the way that we interact with the healthcare system. They break that out into a lot of sub-competencies. I won't go through all of those in the interest of time here, but the idea is that part of our role in medical education is to help our learners start to integrate those ideals into who they are and how they identify themselves as a practicing physician. And so we talk about this a lot within the medical education curriculum. When our students get out into the clinical arena, sometimes this isn't front of mind, but I do think that our role in the clinical arena is really important in terms of helping our students integrate these ideas into who they are. I would point out that professionalism is a behavioral response, and it's influenced by a lot of external factors. So it's influenced by stressors, opposing priorities, but what it's not is an intrinsic trait. So we come to medical school, we come to our careers with the experiences that we've had, with those things that help form us as an individual. But that's not static. It doesn't stop at a particular point. And the experiences and the interactions that we have along the way do have the ability to impact professionalism and that professional development on an ongoing basis. So this isn't something that we start where we're at. It's not an innate trait that we can't have an impact on. And that gets us into this idea of professional identity formation. So professional identity formation is this journey that people take. And I don't say learners specifically. Again, this is a lifelong process, a career-long process, where you integrate the knowledge, skills, values, behaviors of a competent humanistic physician with your own unique identity and core values. And so you can imagine all of these pieces come together and overlap to get to this core of who you are and how you identify yourself as a physician. Early on, so this again is a process that takes place over time. So early on, a lot of what this is focused on is kind of external validation. So thinking about things that please others. So giving an example outside of medicine, if we have someone, a West Point cadet, who's reflecting on why caring is a good part of their leadership training, they might say something like, it's because it's the tangible rewards of what will happen if someone does care about you. Whereas later on in the career, that understanding of your identity evolves and it becomes more sophisticated and it starts to become a little bit more inward or greater purpose focused. And so that same person, when they're an Army officer, might think about the impact of their leadership on others and how others kind of progress in their careers and how they're serving a greater good. And so that transition happens as we become a little bit more sophisticated and we start to integrate those concepts into not just how we're thinking about the world, but who we are as people and as physicians. Again, this is a spectrum, and taking this back to pediatrics specifically, we might have a student who appears interested in pediatrics, but they're not fully engaged as a professional. And this is more of an observational role. So they're in clinic, they're watching, they're not really integrating themselves into the clinical care so much. But as they move through that spectrum, they're going to start to demonstrate an understanding of that professional role, and take on more responsibility and take on more aspects of the care. And eventually down the road, hopefully the goal is that we're thinking about the care of patients. And again, we're seeing ourselves as something, a part of something that's larger and greater than us as individuals. So what about the hidden curriculum? We've talked about professionalism, professional identity. So where does the hidden curriculum come into this? So the hidden curriculum, there are different definitions for this, but the way I conceptualize it is we have the formal curriculum. The formal curriculum is the things that we say we want our learners to be able to do when they finish their training. It's the structures that we set up to support that. It's our evaluation system. It's all those things that we spend time planning and writing down. And so you might think of that as being all the things that the medical school is trying to accomplish. That happens within a greater context. And this is particularly important for us in the clinical training realm. It's important in the preclinical training too, but particularly when the students and our residents and our fellows too, for that matter, get out into the actual realm of seeing patients, being involved in clinical care. You layer those formal things on top of the real world. So you're having to do that practice and learn how to be a physician within a real clinical context. And so all of those things that are going on within that clinical arena that we didn't plan for, that serendipity, those good things, those bad things, those challenging things, those all impact the experience. And those are things that we learn from, even though we didn't plan to learn from them. So that piece of unplanned happenstance, that's the hidden curriculum. And a great deal of what is taught and most of what is learned in medical school doesn't take place within those formal offerings, but it's in that hidden curriculum that we really start to have the pieces come together that help us with that professional identity formation. And so this is hugely important as we think about and reflect. If you think back on your own experiences as a trainee and as a new faculty member too, I am sure that everyone can think of some specific experiences that weren't some formal training piece that that someone planned for that had an impact on you and made you think about what your role is as a physician. There are another way to think about this is these are aspects of the program that are part of the planned curriculum again. This can be things like the cultural norms, the values, the beliefs that are conveyed in the learning environment. So the place that you're at, the culture of that institution plays a huge role in what the hidden curriculum is. And again, it's really important for professional identity formation as we're thinking about who we want to be and what our place is within the medical arena. It's important to say that these things in an ideal world should align with that formal curriculum. So we would love for the experiences that students and residents and our trainees are having to reinforce the things that we think are important. There are things that they're going to learn that are important that we didn't think of, and that's great too. But on the opposite side, that hidden curriculum can undermine the formal curriculum, and it can undermine positive professional identity as well. So it's important to think about this. And to put a point on it, the negative impact can be things like when they observe a lack of accountability to patients. Physician burnout, this is part of the context that we live within. Negative attitudes or apathy. impacts of things like the electronic health record on this kind of depersonalization of patient care. Seeing examples of poor work-life balance, seeing people that are practicing really defensive medicine. So these aren't things that are part of our formal curriculum, but these are things that happen. This is part of being involved in medicine, and students are going to see these things and observe these things. Our residents are too, and at some level, they're going to reflect on these things, and some of these things, as they're forming their own identity, they're going to internalize these concepts. On the opposite side, the hidden curriculum can be really powerful in terms of helping people think about their role and how they can have a positive impact. Seeing examples of kindness, caring attitudes, and positive role modeling has a huge impact. Respect for that work-life balance through positive role modeling is something that I think we are thinking about and talking about a lot more, because we recognize the burnout epidemic that's going on within medicine. And thinking about, getting away from this hierarchical approach to medicine and the use of interprofessional teams and interprofessionalism to carry out the care of patients. And then really developing an environment of transparency where we talk about and think about these ideas of personal accountability, recognizing when we make mistakes and talking about those things. So things that have specifically been proven to be important for thinking about professional identity formation within the context of the hidden curriculum. There's a list of them here. These are things that are backed up by published medical education research. There are two of them that I'm going to highlight here as we're kind of wrapping up the last piece of our presentation this morning. And that's self-reflection and giving our learners space for self-reflection, and then role modeling. And these two, in my opinion, are the easiest and most tangible, and they can both have a really impactful meaning for our learners as we're working with them. So role modeling is obviously something that we all do, whether we're thinking about it or not. But some characteristics of effective role models include clinical competency, so people that are coming across as providing good and excellent care. Teaching skills, so people that engage with students and get them really engaged in the process of patient care. And then there's some personal qualities that can go into this too. But if we're thinking about ways that we can be better role models, number one, be aware that you are a role model, whether you're paying attention to this or not. You're being observed, and the trainees that are working with you are looking to you as an example of how to act and how to behave, and ultimately, what it means to be a physician. Again, demonstrating clinical competence, so talking about the evidence behind the things that we're doing and why we do make the decisions that we make in clinical medicine. Making sure that there is time for teaching. And I know that we all recognize all of the stresses and time crunch that we have with all the conflicting priorities, but taking that extra minute to say a word to your trainee at the end of a clinical encounter can make the world a difference. Showing a positive attitude in what you do. We all get tired sometimes, but approaching the patient care in a way that shows that you are engaged and you care about what's happening. Having a learner-centered approach to teaching. And we've talked about some strategies for this in prior faculty development sessions, but thinking about what the learner actually needs and how you can help them achieve some of their personal learning goals can make a big difference here. Facilitating reflection. So I mentioned this one earlier, particularly about clinical experiences they're having. So sometimes the clinical arena is going to be really busy and rushed, but that self-reflection time is really, really important as we're trying to internalize some of these concepts. So having a minute where they can think back on something that happened and think about how that went, whether things went well, what their role was within the patient care can be really powerful for our learners. Having dialogue with our colleagues and talking about things that are going on. And ultimately being explicit about what you're modeling. So talk about why you're doing the things that you do. And that doesn't have to be just the direct patient care you're providing. That can be how you're interacting with the team, how you're leading a team if it's an interprofessional team, and taking a minute to stop and talk about those things can be really useful for our learners. Last slide or two here as we're wrapping up. So what are some strategies that we can use to start to pull out that hidden curriculum and make it a little bit more explicit and talk about it and its impact? Again, we can dedicate some time for reflection. This can be when something really sentinel happens. So if there's a patient that dies, taking a few minutes to reflect on that and how that impacts us. Encouraging conversations about problems or uncomfortable situations. And this one is the one that I really would encourage people to think about. It's sometimes tempting as leaders and as educators to try to make ourselves come across as very confident and that we have all the answers and that we're experienced, because that's important, and it's important for the way we interact with patients and families. But I think all of us, if we're honest, have things that we don't feel as comfortable about. There are things that we've probably made mistakes along the way and probably learned a lot from those mistakes. Explicitly talking about those things and where you had an experience maybe or something that's happening today in the clinic when you're taking care of patients, how that went and how you role model, how you deal with those situations, can be hugely impactful in the way that people are coming about this process of forming their own professional identity and normalizing this idea that mistakes do happen, and letting some of that vulnerability come across is really important for our learners. It's not always comfortable and easy to do, but this is something that can have a huge impact and make a difference for our learners as they're going through the process and hopefully down the road becoming our colleagues. So just to summarize and wrap up, since my time is up here, professionalism and professional identity formation are essential components of what makes a successful physician. The hidden curriculum can hinder our goal or help our goal of promoting positive identity formation. And ultimately, if we can help align the formal curriculum and the hidden curriculum by addressing these issues in an explicit way, we can really help our learners come along that pathway a little bit faster and be positive role models for them in a way that's going to not just impact them today, but hopefully through their whole careers. So I'm going to stop here in the interest of time to keep our meeting on track, but we will send out these slides after the presentation, and I am happy to provide any questions, answers via email if you guys have them. Thank you.